Sometimes the most painful truth comes from those who want to hurt us, but the outcome turns out completely different from what they planned. When an anonymous email arrived in my inbox with photographs of my wife in another man's arms, I initially thought it was some kind of mistake. But these shots were taken outside a hotel in downtown Chicago, where Valerie and I used to meet for dates before we got married. My name is Thad, and for 8 years I had been married to the woman I considered my best friend. The photographs were taken professionally from different angles and on different days. Someone had very carefully documented her meetings with this man. There wasn't a single word in the email, just this evidence and the hotel address with a room number. The sender remained unknown, but their intentions were clear. For the first few days I tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was a work colleague? Valerie worked at a marketing agency, and I knew she had to meet with clients. But then why were they embracing? And why had she never mentioned these meetings? I decided not to confront her immediately, but to conduct my own investigation. I started paying attention to her phone calls, to how she behaved at home. Valerie had indeed started staying late at work more often, but this could have been related to the new project she had mentioned. The worst part was realizing that I was starting to spy on my own wife. I was ashamed of my suspicions, but the photographs spoke for themselves. This evidence was too convincing to ignore. A week later, I received another letter. This time it contained screenshots of text messages between Valerie and an unknown man named Marcus. The messages were quite intimate, but the strangest thing was that in one of the latest ones he wrote about wanting her to leave me and marry him. But her response shocked me. "Marcus, we've talked about this. I'm not going to destroy my marriage. What's between us is just passion, but that is my family." I reread this message dozens of times, trying to understand my feelings. On one hand, she was cheating on me. On the other, she was refusing to leave me for her lover. The following days were the hardest of my life. I understood that I couldn't continue living with this information, but I also didn't know how to act correctly. Valerie behaved with me as always, caringly and tenderly. Perhaps too tenderly, as if she was trying to compensate for something. But what really ate at me wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was the realization that our entire relationship had become a lie. Every kiss goodnight, every "I love you," every shared laugh over dinner, it all felt tainted now. I found myself analyzing every conversation we'd had over the past months, looking for clues I had missed. I started having trouble sleeping. I would lie awake next to her, watching her peaceful face in the moonlight, wondering if she was dreaming about him. Did she compare us? Did she think about him when she was with me? These thoughts were like poison, slowly killing whatever love I had left. The third letter arrived 2 weeks later, and it contained information that changed everything. The sender finally identified himself. It was Marcus himself. In the letter, he wrote, "Thad, I know this might seem strange, but I was hoping that you would find out about my relationship with Valerie and decide to divorce her. I love her and want to be with her, but she refuses to leave you. Maybe if you initiate the divorce yourself, she'll realize that our future together is inevitable." I was stunned by this man's cynicism. He wasn't just destroying my marriage, he was trying to manipulate both of us to get what he wanted. And the worst part was that his plan had almost worked. I really had been ready to file for divorce, but now I understood the true motives of the person who had opened my eyes. But there was something else in that letter that made my blood boil. Marcus had included details about their relationship that were clearly meant to hurt me. He described intimate moments they had shared, places they had been together, things she had told him about me. He wrote about how she complained that I worked too much, that I wasn't spontaneous enough, that our relationship had become predictable. Reading those words felt like being stabbed repeatedly. Not only was she cheating on me, but she was sharing our private life with her lover, mocking our relationship behind my back. The woman I had trusted with everything was using our most personal moments as conversation material with another man. That's when I realized exactly how I would act. Instead of confronting Valerie immediately, I decided to play a long game. I hired a private detective not to prove the fact of the affair, but to learn more about Marcus and his plans. It turned out that Marcus was married and had 2 children. He worked in the same field as Valerie, but at a competing company. The detective also discovered that this wasn't his first attempt to break up someone else's marriage for his own benefit. 2 years ago, he had a similar relationship with another married woman, but that time his plan didn't work out. The detective's report painted a picture of a serial manipulator. Marcus had a pattern of targeting married women in vulnerable positions, usually those going through career transitions or family stress. He would present himself as understanding and supportive, gradually drawing them into emotional affairs that became physical. His ultimate goal was always the same: to get them to leave their husbands for him. But here's what made it even more twisted. He never actually intended to stay with these women long-term. The detective found evidence of at least 3 previous affairs, each following the same pattern. He would pursue a married woman, convince her to leave her husband, and then after a few months he would end the relationship, claiming he wasn't ready for commitment. Armed with this information, I developed my own revenge plan. But I wanted to get back not only at Valerie for her betrayal, but also at Marcus for his manipulations. I decided that both of them should understand the consequences of their actions. My plan was methodical and comprehensive. I spent weeks gathering evidence, documenting everything, and preparing for what would be the most satisfying revenge of my life. I wanted them to feel exactly what I had felt: the shock of betrayal, the pain of realizing they had been manipulated, and the emptiness of losing everything they thought they had. First, I anonymously sent Marcus's wife all the evidence of his infidelity, not just the photos with Valerie, but information about his previous affairs as well. I included bank statements showing expensive hotel rooms and restaurant bills, credit card records of gifts he had bought for his various mistresses, and even recorded phone conversations I had obtained through my detective. His wife, Sarah, was devastated but also furious. She immediately filed for divorce and made sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly what kind of man Marcus was. She posted about it on social media, contacted his employer, and even reached out to the wives of his previous victims. Marcus's carefully constructed image as a devoted family man crumbled overnight. But that was just the beginning. I had learned that Marcus was up for a major promotion at his company, one that would have made him a partner. I anonymously sent his employers evidence of his affairs, particularly focusing on how he had used company resources for his personal relationships and how his behavior constituted a violation of their ethics policies. The company launched an internal investigation. They discovered that Marcus had been using company credit cards for his affairs, taking personal calls during work hours, and even meeting his mistresses in conference rooms after hours. He was not only denied the promotion but was placed on probation with a formal reprimand in his file. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything about Valerie's affair as well. I hired forensic accountants to trace any money she might have spent on gifts for Marcus or activities related to their relationship. I discovered she had been using our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms, expensive lingerie, and even a weekend getaway they had taken together while I thought she was at a work conference. The financial betrayal hurt almost as much as the emotional one. She had been spending our money I had earned through long hours and hard work, to fund her affair. Every expensive dinner with him, every hotel room, every gift she bought him was paid for with funds from our joint account. Then I arranged a meeting with Valerie at the same hotel where she had been meeting Marcus. I told her I knew about her affair and showed her all the evidence. But the biggest shock for her was when I also showed her the letters from Marcus, in which he confessed that he was the one who had told me about their relationship. "He used you, Valerie," I said. "And he used me too. He thought he could manipulate both of us to get what he wanted. But now he has nothing. Not you, not his family, not his career." Valerie broke down completely. She cried, saying she had never intended to leave me, that it was just a mistake, a passion that meant nothing. She begged me to understand, to forgive her, to give our marriage another chance. She promised she would never see Marcus again, would change jobs if necessary, would do anything to make it right. But I had already made my decision. "I understand more than you think," I told her. "I understand that you shared intimate details about our marriage with him. I understand that you complained about me to your lover. I understand that you used our money to fund your affair. Most importantly, I understand that you made a conscious choice to betray our vows every single time you met with him." She tried to explain that Marcus had manipulated her, that he had made her feel special and understood in ways that I hadn't. She claimed he had preyed on her insecurities about our marriage, convincing her that she deserved more excitement and passion in her life. "Maybe that's true," I said. "But you still made the choice. Every time you got in your car to meet him, every time you lied to me about where you were going, every time you came home and kissed me after being with him, those were your choices, Valerie, not his." I could see the moment when she realized that our marriage was truly over. The tears stopped and her face went blank. She asked what I wanted from her, how we would handle the divorce, whether I would try to take everything. "I want you to understand something," I said. "Marcus destroyed his own life trying to get you. He lost his wife, his children, his career, his reputation, all for a woman who was never going to leave her husband for him. And now he can't even have that consolation because you're going to lose me anyway." The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus had gotten exactly what he wanted. Our marriage was ending. But instead of winning Valerie, he had lost everything and she was about to lose everything too. I had already started the divorce proceedings before that meeting. I filed on grounds of adultery, with extensive documentation of her affair. My lawyer assured me that given the evidence I had gathered, the settlement would be heavily in my favor. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more surprise for both of them. I had discovered that Marcus and Valerie weren't just having an affair, they had been planning to start a business together. Marcus had been feeding her information about his company's clients, and she had been sharing confidential information from her agency. They were planning to leave their respective jobs and start a competing agency, using insider information from both companies. This wasn't just adultery, it was corporate espionage. I gathered all the evidence of their business communications and sent it to both their employers simultaneously. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Valerie was fired from her job and faced potential legal action for breach of contract and theft of proprietary information. Her reputation in the industry was destroyed, and she found herself effectively blacklisted from working in marketing in Chicago. Marcus, who was already on thin ice at his company, was terminated immediately. His employer also filed a lawsuit against him for industrial espionage and breach of fiduciary duty. Between the divorce proceedings from his wife and the legal action from his company, he was facing financial ruin. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Valerie didn't contest anything, she couldn't afford to, having lost her job and facing her own legal troubles. I got the house, most of our assets, and she was required to pay me back for all the money she had spent on the affair from our joint accounts. But the real satisfaction came from watching both of their lives fall apart in exactly the way they had tried to destroy mine. Marcus had lost his wife, his children, who wanted nothing to do with him after learning about his serial affairs, his job, his reputation, and his financial security. He had to move in with his elderly parents while fighting multiple lawsuits. Valerie lost her marriage, her career, her financial security, and her self-respect. She had to move back in with her sister in California, taking a job at a small company for a fraction of her previous salary. The worst part for her was realizing that Marcus had never actually loved her, she had just been another conquest in his pattern of manipulation. The final twist came 6 months after our divorce was finalized. I received a call from Marcus. He was drunk and desperate, calling to tell me that Valerie wanted nothing to do with him. She had realized that he had destroyed both their lives with his scheme and blamed him entirely for the collapse of her marriage. "She hates me," he slurred into the phone. "She says I ruined everything for nothing. She never wanted to leave you and now she's lost everything because of me." I listened to his pathetic rambling for a few minutes before responding. "Marcus, you got exactly what you asked for. You wanted to destroy my marriage and you did. You wanted Valerie to be free of me and she is. The fact that neither of you is happy with the result is your problem, not mine." He tried to apologize, saying he had made a terrible mistake, that he had never meant for things to go this far. He claimed he had genuinely loved Valerie and thought they could be happy together if I was out of the picture. "The problem with your plan," I told him, "was that it was based on lies from the beginning. You lied to yourself about loving her, you just wanted to win. You lied to her about your intentions, you just wanted to possess her. And you lied to me about your motives, you thought you could manipulate me into doing your dirty work." I hung up on him and blocked his number. I never heard from him again, though I did hear through mutual acquaintances that he eventually moved to another state, still struggling with the legal and financial consequences of his actions. Valerie tried to contact me a few times in the months following our divorce. She sent emails apologizing, asking if we could talk, wondering if there was any chance of reconciliation. I never responded. There was nothing left to say. The most satisfying part of my revenge wasn't the financial settlements or watching their careers crumble. It was the knowledge that they had both gotten exactly what they had asked for, just not in the way they had expected. Marcus had wanted to destroy my marriage so he could have Valerie. He succeeded in destroying the marriage, but in the process, he made it impossible for him to have her. His manipulation and betrayal had poisoned any chance they might have had together. Valerie had wanted the excitement of an affair without losing the security of her marriage. She got neither, the affair ended in disaster and she lost her marriage anyway. Her attempt to have both worlds had cost her everything. As for me, I had wanted justice and I got it in full measure. But more than that, I had learned something valuable about myself. I had discovered that I was capable of strategic thinking and patient planning that I never knew I possessed. I had outmaneuvered two people who thought they were cleverer than me, and I had done it without compromising my own integrity. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in October. I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in months. The burden of living with betrayal was finally lifted, and I was free to start rebuilding my life. I never saw Valerie again after our final court appearance. I heard she eventually found work at a small firm in Los Angeles and was trying to rebuild her career. I wished her well in that endeavor, not out of lingering affection, but because I had no desire to see her suffer indefinitely. My revenge was complete, and my anger had been satisfied. Marcus, from what I gathered, never recovered professionally. His reputation in the industry was permanently damaged, and he struggled to find steady work. The irony was perfect. A man who had built his career on manipulation and deception had finally been undone by his own tactics. 2 years later, I remarried. My new wife, Jennifer, was nothing like Valerie. She was straightforward, honest, and had no tolerance for games or manipulation. When I told her the story of my first marriage, she was amazed at the complexity of my revenge plan. "Weren't you tempted to just confront them directly?" she asked. "For about 5 minutes," I replied. "But then I realized that a direct confrontation would have given them what they wanted: drama, emotion, and ultimately, an excuse to paint me as the bad guy. By staying patient and methodical, I made sure they could only blame themselves for the consequences." Looking back, I realized that Marcus's anonymous letters had actually done me a favor. If I had discovered the affair through other means, I might have reacted emotionally and impulsively. His attempt to manipulate me had inadvertently taught me the value of strategic thinking and careful planning. The most ironic part of the entire situation was that Marcus had orchestrated his own downfall. By sending me those letters, he had given me all the information I needed to destroy both their lives. His arrogance and overconfidence had blinded him to the possibility that I might be smarter and more ruthless than he had anticipated. Years later, I sometimes wonder if Valerie ever understood the full scope of what had happened. Did she realize that Marcus had never loved her, that she had been just another target in his pattern of manipulation? Did she understand that her affair hadn't been a romantic escape, but rather a calculated move in someone else's game? I hope she did. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because understanding the truth would have been the first step toward preventing it from happening again. The real tragedy of her story wasn't just that she had lost her marriage, it was that she had been so easily manipulated into destroying it. As for Marcus, I sometimes saw his name in professional contexts, always associated with some small, struggling company. He never regained the success he had enjoyed before his scheme backfired. His reputation preceded him everywhere he went, and potential employers were wary of someone with his history. The final chapter of this story came 5 years after the divorce, when I received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from Valerie, but this time it wasn't an attempt at reconciliation. She was writing to thank me. In the letter, she explained that the destruction of her old life had ultimately been a blessing in disguise. Losing her high-pressure job had forced her to reevaluate her priorities and pursue work that was more meaningful to her. She had started a small nonprofit organization helping other women who had been victims of manipulation and abuse. She wrote that she had never fully understood how Marcus had manipulated her until years later, when she began working with other victims of similar schemes. She realized that her affair hadn't been about passion or love, it had been about a predator finding and exploiting her vulnerabilities. "I want you to know," she wrote, "that while I regret the pain I caused you, I'm grateful that you exposed the truth about Marcus and about myself. If you hadn't acted as you did, I might have continued living in his web of lies indefinitely. The harsh consequences I faced forced me to confront who I had become and to work toward becoming someone better." She ended the letter by saying she hoped I was happy and that she bore me no ill will for how I had handled the situation. She understood that my actions, while painful for her at the time, had ultimately been necessary to break the cycle of deception that had trapped all three of us. I kept that letter not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder of how complex human motivations can be. Valerie's journey from betrayer to victim to survivor was something I hadn't anticipated when I planned my revenge. It added a dimension to the story that I found both surprising and oddly satisfying. The lesson I learned from this entire experience was that the best revenge isn't about causing suffering, it's about revealing truth. By exposing Marcus's manipulation and Valerie's betrayal, I hadn't just punished them, I had freed all of us from a situation built on lies. Marcus got what he deserved: the complete collapse of his carefully constructed facade and the loss of everything he had tried to gain through deception. Valerie got what she needed: a harsh but necessary wake-up call that ultimately led her to a more authentic life. And I got what I wanted: justice, closure, and the satisfaction of knowing that truth had prevailed over manipulation. In the end, the most powerful revenge was simply letting people face the natural consequences of their choices. Marcus had chosen to be a manipulator, and he lost everything when his manipulations were exposed. Valerie had chosen to betray her marriage, and she lost that marriage when her betrayal came to light. Sometimes the most painful truth comes from those who want to hurt us, but sometimes that pain is exactly what we need to break free from situations that are slowly destroying us. Marcus thought he was manipulating me into destroying my marriage, but what he actually did was give me the tools to save myself from a relationship that had already been destroyed by lies. That, perhaps, was the ultimate irony of his plan. In trying to hurt me, he had actually helped me. And in trying to help himself, he had destroyed everything he claimed to want. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.